Coaching as Benevolence, a podcast for people who are curious about using coaching for self-development. I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings Grief and Loss Coaching.
And I'm L Shawn with Michelle Sage Place Positive Intelligence Coaching. We are at the end of our guided journal. We just finished the third section of the guided journal, which is entitled Act. So the guided journal title is Coaching Nuggets of Wisdom to Inspire, Explore, Act, Flourish, a guided journal to live your best life. We finished the Act section last week, and now we are in the Flourish section. And the Flourish section is different from the other sections. Each of the three preceding sections had 6 to 7 prompts. These prompts were related to the section, the theme. So we had inspire, explore, and act. This section, Flourish, it has a prompt just to get you started. And then the idea is to continue exploring aspects of your life or aspects of life in general that help you to flourish in life. So the prompt in the Flourish section begins, grow with hope and live with intention. I will continue to read the prompt, and then we will talk about the prompt and the journal and how this season has been about the journal and the different conversations that we've had. And as usual, this will be an organic conversation, and we'll see where it takes us. Okay, so I will continue reading the prompt. Grow with hope and live with intention. Throughout the year, use this journaling space to reflect on your own flourishing. What does that look like and feel like for you? How can you lean into the flow of things when they are going well? What will help you stay buoyant when they are not? What do you notice? And how can you live with hope and intention? So I love this prompt because it wraps everything up, I think, all the different sections that we went through: inspire, explore, act. But we definitely talked about buoyancy in one of the sections. Intention is throughout, because by journaling and looking at different aspects of your life that enrich and enhance your experience, that's intentional. Journaling is intentional. So that's throughout. And then the idea of hope. That came up in our last conversation about being bold, trying something new. And it has come up in other conversations as well. And I also love that we end the journal with flourish and flourishing, because what is flourishing? I think that's a really important thing to contemplate, to think about what it is to you. What does flourishing mean to you? For me, it's living in alignment with my values and, my purpose in life and being fulfilled in what I do and how I spend my time. So being authentic, being aligned with my values, and living a purposeful life, that is what it means for me to flourish. I love that this section is open to continue journaling. It suggests that journaling is not a one and done thing. So once you're done with this guided journal, if this is something that has really enhanced and enriched your life, I encourage the reader to continue with that and to continue doing some of the activities if they have helped you and if they have made life more fulfilling and more meaningful to you. Because really what journaling is a form of meaning making. And when our lives are meaningful and purposeful, we are able to flourish. When we live a purposeful and fulfilling, meaningful life, it connects us with something bigger than ourselves. And I think that can also be a way for us to flourish as well. So this section of the journal, being the last section, is a great chance to reflect as well. Reflect on the things that have worked throughout the journal and what has not worked and what information that gives you about yourself and your growth. Grow with hope and live with intention. I love that. I'm going to hold that in my mind as I move forward in my week. And I'm going to continue to think about what it means to grow with hope and live with intention. What's coming up for you, Eryn?
So hope as a word, as a concept, as an action, all of it is really standing out to me because of that first sentence that you just repeated and seemed to resonate with a lot in terms of growing with hope and living with intention. And earlier you were talking about intention and what that looks like. And then the hope piece is really fascinating in the way that we frame that, where it says grow with hope. So we're growing with hope. It's kind of emerging alongside us, within us, outside of us. It's this kind of active thing that doesn't go away, but can grow. And hope can look like one thing one day, but can bud into something much more meaningful the next. And then I want to tie that back to what you said about this being tied to being connected to something more meaningful, like a higher power or bigger purpose or connectedness to others. And I think that is where hope really manifests in our lives, when we can acknowledge that connectedness, the interconnectedness of our lives with others and potentially a spiritual world. And then that gives us the levity to create the life that we should be living and can be living. And I really like that concept. And I think that relates back in the journal to the concept around buoyancy. We talk about that word quite a bit. It showed up in some of the prompts, at least one of them, about how do you stay buoyant. And I think this is an example of how the journaler can stay buoyant, is by really exploring this first sentence about growing with hope and living with intention, and having a chance to get those ideas flowing and those thoughts out around this. I always feel so much more aligned and lighthearted when we have these recordings, because it's like this journal has taken me on a journey where I have felt supported by the language that is used within this journal. And then having the opportunity then to talk about it has been this extra layer of support and understanding. And so this has brought a lot of beauty into my life, for lack of better words, because it's been really helpful, at the most foundational level. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what we're trying to help our people who listen to this and who journal within this journal create for themselves, is that space to gain a deeper understanding and live a fuller life rooted in these concepts that we know are helpful and can be very supportive in terms of understanding our own values, understanding ourselves, and understanding our way in the world. And so I think those are some of my initial thoughts that I have from this journal. And then just this concept of, this free journaling space. This is a space to come back to within the year and just journal throughout the year in this open journaling space that's at the end of this journal. So being sure to put a calendar reminder on your phone or somewhere where you can easily see it to come back and revisit, I think, is going to help with that growing with hope and living with intentionality. And it reminds me, I actually just got a kind of day-to-day journal. I've been looking for a while for something that spoke to what I'm really needing to write down, because I keep everything in my electronic calendar. But I wanted something that was could kind of give me an understanding of the year day by day that I could look back to, that's very easy to see, doesn't take up much space for each page or each day. And I came across this journal that's doing that for me. And I'm not one to typically daily journal. And I've been getting in the habit of this one, and it's been really helpful. So I just thought I'd share, just because I have found it useful, and maybe other people might too. But the way this is broken down is, at the top, you write date and then you circle the day of the week. So there's a lot of flexibility there with that. And then at the top after that, it says today I'm grateful for. So just by having that prompt there, it reminds me to write down, what I am grateful for. And then it gives me a list of a space to write in my top priorities for the day. So this is really nice because it's different from my calendar because I can really think about, okay, I have all these tasks on my calendar and all these meetings for all these clients. And then how do I make sure that I interweave these top priorities? And then underneath that section, it talks about like events / appointments and times. And so that's a good place for me to make a quick note of somebody that maybe I had a meeting, not with a client, but with a colleague or somebody who does similar work. I can, just take that quick note, put the time down, this day that it happened, and then just see it all in the day. And then there's a space for notes. And then at the bottom, it just has like a quick mood tracker, water, and then today's review based off of 5 stars. And so I can kind of highlight the amount of stars. But what I love about this, it's not even a full like legal pad size. It's a smaller journal. And I feel like I get so much out of that page each day because it doesn't take much time, but it's so helpful. So anyway, I wanted to share that as a concept of how I'm going back to journaling kind of daily based on my reflections in this own journal and really finding something that fits my specific needs for kind of my more day to day and the nuance of that. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. I don't know. It was helpful for me to say it aloud and remind myself why I do this, I guess, too. So I'll pass it back to you, LaShawn.
I love that. I think that's such a great example of how you can take what we've learned or just from the practice that we have participated in this season, going through the different prompts and how that has inspired and given you the tools or the ideas that you need in order to create something that you can use to extend the benefit of the journaling, and then how it is part of an already established habit of your daily activities in your electronic calendar, but to have another journal that builds in not just tasks that need to be performed or done, but also builds in that reflection piece. And then I love how you integrated gratitude, because that is something that you have brought up throughout our conversations about how you intentionally include moments of gratitude where you're looking at the things that you feel grateful for, where you have that list of things that you appreciate, things that you are grateful for. And I think that's such a great example of how we can create some tool, or we can create a habit, a new habit that is connected to old established habits, and that also can allow us to continue that practice of living intentionally. And I think that living intentionally also gives us the opportunity to nurture and foster those feelings of hope, because I want to go back to hope. When we are intentionally looking at the things that are going well, or we're intentionally looking at things that we're grateful for, that creates a feeling of hope and expectation for things to go well. Because if we are reminding ourselves of all these things that we are surrounded by that are working and that are enriching and bringing about positive things in our lives, then we can then feel comfortable or safe to know that that can continue. And I think that's part of hope too, is just knowing that although we are not sure what the outcome might be, we do know that there is a history of outcomes being positive or good. So that it's balanced. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's balanced so that when we live intentionally, when we're bringing in those pieces that we don't normally, that the human brain is not used to noticing, we notice novelty, and we notice things that are different. And often things that are different are sometimes things that are going wrong or that aren't working out the way that we want them to. Not always, but usually, I would say that often we might lean towards the things that are not going well, or lean towards the outcomes that are not as good as we wanted them to be. And it's easy to overlook the things that are going well because they're going well. So that's something that I think that's so great about your I would even like call it a diary, because I'm thinking about back in the time when the written word, there was a certain sense of, like, I would say, like, sophistication in keeping daily record of your life. And so I see that as kind of like a diary in a way. And also there's so much revealed when you look at historical documents, and you can see letters and diaries from people who lived in like the 18th century or the 17th century or the 19th century, and you can see like their day-to-day life and kind of piece that together. So it's a way to look at your own growth, to look back and see, what changed, or what were some of the things that were important to me in July? What kind of things were important to me this time last year? Just to go back and look at, the reflections and the things that you were grateful for. I love that. I think that is such a great way of just keeping record of your growth. And also it's a way to have something for posterity too, I think, as well, just on the historical aspect of, keeping record and just keeping track of what you're doing and thinking and experiencing. And that brings me back to being part of something bigger than yourself. I think knowing that you are part of history, and that you are, that your thoughts and your everyday things that you might think right now are just mundane or specific to you, could be a window into, what it was like for, someone in the 21st century. Like, what were the things that they were looking at? What was important to them? So I that's kind of a tangent, but it's just something I was thinking about. Just journaling in itself is a way to keep track of and document your growth. So that's one of the things that I was thinking about too. And this is also a way for us to look at what is working in life, and to get a picture of what flourishing looks like to us. Often I think about, with flourishing, I think about gardens, and what does a flourishing garden look like? It's verdant, and there's lots of light. Like, you can see lots of pollinators and lots of activity, natural activity going on in a flourishing garden. I think about lots of colors, and I think of vibrance, and I think of, all the different seasons as well, like how the plants in the garden, how they respond to the different seasons. Are they protected from frost? Are they robust? Are they resilient? Is there a sense that they'll come back? Is it perennial? Like, are there different blossoms and different things that you see throughout the seasons, and different wildlife that interacts with a garden? You can often tell the health of a garden based on the different wildlife that interacts with it, like birds and bees and rabbits and other things that come in and out of the garden. And it's a sense of life, and just the vibrant, how I'm trying to think of the word, but just the vitality. That's it, the vitality of a garden. And that's what I think when I think of flourishing. How about you, Eryn? What comes to mind when you think of flourishing?
Well, I will say, as you talked about your response to the journaling that I shared, and then kind of move through your response and then into this piece around the garden, it seemed like the more you talked, the more imagery and fullness your language held, which makes it also, which is fascinating to me, because that is maybe an example of flourishing, right? Like where we sit with a topic and we talk about it and hold space for it. And so to me, that's what flourishing is holding space, right? And it gets us to a place of being more fulfilled potentially, or flourishing in the context of how you articulated the beautiful imagery of this garden and things like that. So that was my initial feeling and response into what you were saying. And it goes back to listening, which today, Rick at church, our pastor, talked about how Gen Alpha, so those are kids born between 2010 and 2016, like the number one thing I guess they expect or want from adults is to be listened to without judgment, kind of like a human thing. It's something that we all probably want and need. And when we can listen to ourselves, that also provides a space for flourishing. And I think that is another way that flourishing really stands out to me. And I like to think about flourishing in the terms of how is it about living one's best life? And that doesn't necessarily mean achievement, right? Like living one's best life is how potentially about how one feels, how one shows up, how one, helps themselves, helps others, etc. It's not maybe this grandiose thing that sometimes is maybe thought of when we think of flourishing, especially in terms of achievement. I think that there is a lot to be said for quiet flourishing, or for understated flourishing, or flourishing that maybe isn't as obvious maybe to another human, or to a lot of humans in the terms of like our connectedness of our world today. So that's something else that's coming up for me a lot. And I think when people sit with that concept of flourishing and write in this journal space about that, we can see that might show up for them as well. Like they might notice things are going really well flourishing wise when maybe some things are a little quieter, or a little more humble, or held with humility, or whatever it may be. But on the other end, right, that's not the case wholly. That's not the whole picture, because sometimes flourishing is louder and takes up more space, not just for us, but around. So it's something that also I wanted to kind of start to grapple with, was this concept about achievement and flourishing. And flourishing as well changes based on where we're at in life, and based on our age, based on various external circumstances. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that, and to grieve in some ways those spaces maybe that we are no longer in, or that we're in a different stage of our lives, and acknowledge that grief while also staying open to a new kind of flourishing. And that to me also is a key part of flourishing, is staying open to the mystery of it all, and to what is becoming and what is shifting and within oneself, so that flourishing is defined, acted upon, looks differently than it did for that same person a year ago or 5 years ago. So I think that also has come up for me. And then sitting with the unknown, because we may wonder what flourishing looks like when we are 5 years down the road. And I know in coaching, or especially when I think of more of like the life coaching side of things, there may be more around future goals and how that relates to values and goal setting and steps to get there and those sorts of things. But I think it's holding that lightly as well, and staying open to the flourishing that might be showing up in the small ways as whatever else is becoming. So a lot of ways, I think, to consider flourishing, and one of the key words is openness that comes up for me in the word of flourishing. I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but this question stands out as well in the prompt. It says, how can you lean into the flow of things when things are going well? I think that goes a little bit back to like wanting to hold on tightly. Oh, things are really going really well. I want this to keep going. And it's almost like the more we hold on, sometimes the the more problematic that becomes. So it's more of that concept of leaning into. And I think we do that by experiencing joy in the moment, having fruitful conversations, staying connected, those sorts of things. So that to me is what really shows up for that question as well. LaShawn, anything within that question stand out to you or any other comments you have?
Well, I like that you spoke about how flourishing does not necessarily have to be tied to achievement. And the thing that came up for me when you were talking about that is that it's really, and we often bring this up in our conversations, that this is really about what works for you. And this is a way for you, the person doing the journaling or the listener of this podcast, to think about and design your own life. And I want to bring back the subtitle to this, which is a guided journal to live your best life. So not the best life, but your best life. And I think really these prompts and these conversations that Eryn and I are having are about designing your own life and giving you the tools that are going to help you identify and become more aware of the things that work for you. And I think that that's something that flows throughout our conversations and throughout the journal prompts. It's really about taking the time to be intentional about creating a life that's full of the things that signify meaning for you and that give you purpose and fulfill you in ways that are unique to you. And so I think that is a great segue into the question that you repeated, Eryn, about how can you lean into the flow of things when they are going well? And the accompanying question is, what will help you stay buoyant when they are not? And I think that's two things, right? So lean into the flow when things are going well. When things are going well, that is an indication that you're aligned, that things are happening in a way that works for you, or that is aligned with your values or aligned with who you really are. When things are not going well, that's information about maybe misalignment or just life in general. I mean, there's things that happen in life, that outcomes that happen that are outside of our control. And so that brings the question, what will help you stay buoyant when they are not? So buoyancy, if you think about buoyancy, like for example, a flotation device on the ocean, something to hold on to that's going to allow you to rest and allow you to just kind of go with the current and not have to do too much work. Although I know that if you like just lie on your back in the ocean, I think that for a while you can really float. But just knowing those ways that you can stay buoyant, that are going to help you navigate situations and outcomes that are not desirable. So I like those two questions. They're two sides of the same coin, right? There's when things are going well, when you're aligned, when things are flowing, when you're in the flow, and then when things are jarring or when things are disruptive, or when you get information that shows you that maybe you are misaligned, or maybe you should change course, or it's out of your control. So then you have to really think about how you want to respond. So I think that those are things that can help us live our best life, because they empower us to not change what we cannot change, what's outside of our power, but they give us the ability to understand our moods, understand what works for us, understands what gives us hope, understand what is meaningful to us, and gives us the opportunity to use those tools to navigate situations that are not as desirable as we might want. So that is one thing that really sticks out to me about this journal and about this prompt in particular. And that is the customizableness of this journal and of our podcast. We really are giving you tools, coaching wisdom for everyday life that will help you enhance your life on your terms. So that's what's coming up for me. Eryn, anything else coming up for you?
Oh, I really like how you paired both of those questions together because it gave me a light bulb moment where I'm like, this is what I would think I was trying to get to, where it says the two questions, how can you lean into the flow of things when they are going well? And then what will help you stay buoyant when they are not? I don't know, something about you saying those two aloud made me really think about the first question and how we can self-sabotage and how I can self-sabotage. So things are going well. And it's like, oh, that can't be right. It's like kind of like this like automatic, what can I do to make this not go well almost in a way. And it's not conscious. Maybe it's at the subconscious level often. And it's a form of trauma. It's also a form of other things, but just being aware of that piece there too, I think stood out to me hearing you read those two questions aloud, that leaning in to things when they're going well is about, I think it's about this courageous step forward of saying, I have these fears. I think this may not go well. And I'm also going to lean into what is going well and let go of the fear that my mind is trying to create or look for that isn't there. And you spoke to that piece as well. So that really stood out to me. And then just how you have framed, the helpfulness of this journal. I really do think that in sitting with this prompt by prompt, week by week, having a conversation about these coaching questions in the theme of inspiration, exploration, action, and flourishing, I think that there is so much beauty, so much love, so much heartfeltness that can flow from people when they revisit these questions and look at each of the prompts and maybe journal on each of the prompts. But even just like if I just turn back to, I turned back in the middle of the journal, not knowing which page I would turn to. And I'm in, what section is that? That's prompt 7 in section Inspire. And it talks about how do you lean into authenticity amidst fear. Well, it's so interesting because I was just talking about fear, and that's the one that kind of just really came out. But just looking back at this section and seeing the notes that I have written, it's just a good reinforcement to have as a resource moving forward in terms of my own journey as well. So I think that's another helpful piece of this journal is having the documentation to go back and look at concepts and grapple with questions and seeing all the wisdom that you've already written down and then going back and seeing how that's changed as well. But also just, like I said, thumbing to a question like I didn't even know which one would show up, and just reading that question and thinking about it and pausing with it. And I think that's the other thing I want to highlight on this journal is you can do that, right? You can go through any section, open to one page, pick one of the questions and reflect on that. So that was the other thing that was coming up for me. So I think that's about all I have on this guided journal to live. It says your best life, but to live my best life, I guess, and for others to live hopefully their best lives. L Shawn, what else do you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that a lot of what you said is really helpful as well, just to go back and look at the prompts in the journal that really resonated with you, and maybe even look at what you wrote in that section and think about what's true for you now and what's not true for you. And that's another way of seeing growth. One thing that came up for me as you were talking, Eryn, is really feeling like we are getting close to the call to action section of this episode. Because one thing that I would just want to say to the listeners is that the episodes that we have recorded going through this journal is also a record of growth in, our own podcast. And it's also a way for listeners to go back and listen to the conversations that came up in the different prompts in the different sections of the journal. And I would say my call to action to the listeners would be to go back and look at the journal and see what prompts really resonated with you. And I would take a page from Eryn's book and see how you can take that and make it your own, just like you did, Eryn, with your journal, and how you made it your own. You put the things that really matter to you and that are meaningful for you and the practice of journaling, and you made it into something different, and that works for you. And that's one of the things that I would encourage our listeners to do as well. Find something from reflecting in the journal that you can take with you and that will help you grow with hope and live with intention.
I really like that, L Shawn. And I think I would also add, for a call to action here as we wrap up our conversation on the journal, is to really trust yourself and listen to the wisdom that you hold, and holding that open-heartedness, or holding that with an open-hearted. Okay, taking a step back here, or hold it with an open heart and open mind. And I think that's one of the key benefits of the journal, is being able to explore with an open heart and open mind.
Thanks for joining us for Coaching as Benevolence. I'm L Shawn with Mayshell Sage Place, Positive Intelligence Coaching.
And I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings, Grief and Loss Coaching.
Have a benevolent day.